Hey, this is Jen from Jen Kiaba Photography, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to create your very own grunge or texture recipe from textures that you either have from me or that you already have in your library. So I'm going to be using this image right here. I'm going to take you a little bit behind the scenes as to how this image was created, show you the grunge recipe that I used to create this image, and then we're going to build our own. So this image is part of a series that I just finished called Burdens of a White Dress, and this particular image is called Helping Hands. And the thing that I was really trying to focus on was continuity within this body of work. And that's why having a grunge recipe is, if you're working with textures, it's so helpful because it creates not only that look of continuity, but you're not reinventing the wheel every single time you go in and edit an image. In fact, I've actually got it mapped out how I edit every single image. So, I'm only focusing on shooting the image, compositing it all together, and then the editing is kind of a no-brainer because I know the look that I'm going for and I've got it written down already. So before I had applied all of my grunge and whatnot, this is actually what the image looked like. This was shot at the end of winter this year, and as you can see, I shoot a blank background image, and then I start to piece everything together, which takes quite a bit of time. And so I'm sure you can imagine that this is starting to get weird, having that whole Photoshop processing kind of mapped out already is super helpful. I'm kind of a systems geek, and that's a hand that actually didn't make it into the final image. But there you kind of get an idea of how I structure things. And this is the grunge recipe that I use. Now, at first glance, this just looks like a regular texture, but it's actually a group of textures that I've created. And I'm going to kind of walk you through it, talk to you a little bit about what everything does, show you how to apply it, and then, like I said, we're going to create our own from a free texture pack that I offer to anybody on my newsletter. So we are going to just turn these off one by one, and you can kind of see what each layer does. Now, the benefit of having every little piece in a different layer is that you can choose which pieces you're going to use and which ones you're not. So here we just start out with your basic image, nothing on it at all. And I've got the same texture, which is a photograph of a piece of parchment applied twice. But as you can see from my naming, one is on multiply mode and the other is on soft light. And they both look really beautiful on an image, and I found that having them both together is super helpful for creating just this oomph in my images. So anytime you have a texture that you really like, try playing around with duping it like this and having it on various blending modes. Now, another one that this is probably my favorite texture of all time, and I'm going to turn it on normal so you can see it in its full glory. This is ink from a National Geographic that has been sprayed down with Citrusolve, and then the pages have been folded, so the ink kind of like does this weird, interesting chemical reaction kind of thing. And I'm not a scientist, so that's the most scientific that I can get for you. But I think it's beautiful, and I just love all of the different stuff going on in here. So this is a go-to texture for me, and you can see actually there's like a little bit of ripped page, which ends up showing a lot in my images. So we're going to bring this back down. I think I had it on multiply, but try soft light again. Screen is also another great blending mode. Now, I've also taken pieces. See, you can see this is actually a piece of the ink over here. I've taken pieces of this layer and extracted them into their own layers to kind of add dimensionality. And I've also got a little clipping mask to invert some of those scratches so I can play with it and see what works best for my image. And then I've got various other bits of scratches here that can be moved around and placed wherever I like. And then I've got something else kind of like that I've just made it so it looks like it's been handled a lot and kind of scratched up in the corner, which I love. Now this is one that I'm actually going to have to zoom in to show you. These are dots. And as I've shown you in other tutorials, you can take pieces of texture or your textures and turn them onto a black and white blending mode or just black and white mode so that you're not getting that blue or that color of whatever your texture that you're using showing up in your image. But these are little plaster dots that were actually extracted from this other layer over here, which adds a really interesting kind of papery feel to the images. This is just extra dots. And this, I'm going to zoom out to show you, this is another feature that I love and I only use sometimes, but these are brush scratches that I've extracted from other images and applied to kind of just distress the image. And the last little piece, which I use sometimes, is just a layer of color that acts as a wash. And then with hue saturation as a clipping mask, I can just kind of play with that color a little bit. You can kind of move it around and see what it does. So it's got a little green to it, a little blue, a little red, stuff like that. But actually, as I mentioned before, sometimes you may not want to use all of these pieces to create your final grunge recipe. I've got this saved with all of these possibilities in here, but the fact is that lately I've only been using a few of them. So I tend to just go through, check how they look on my image, and then delete what doesn't work. So this is probably the closest to what I actually work with on a regular basis. So now what you can do is you can just drag this to the image that you're working on, and your entire group, as long as you've got it built as a group, will now be transferred to your image. Now, obviously, this is pretty dark, and so again, the beauty of this is I can now go in and maybe multiply wasn't the right choice for this layer. I put it on soft light, and suddenly I've got something really great. And maybe I don't like these scratches right here. They just distract too much from the snow. Delete it. So having that recipe is really helpful because basically you can pick and choose the ingredients that you want to have. And you also get to save this as a file that you can refer to over and over again. So what I'm going to do now is close this out. We are not going to save this. And I've created just a new file here, and I'm using crackled paint from my free texture pack that you get for being on my newsletter. And we're going to just build something together really quickly so that you have an idea of how to build your own. So right now this is the, like I said, the crackled paint from my texture pack. And it's on a normal blending mode with 100% opacity, which means that if it gets applied, it's straight up just going to look like this on my image. But if I go in and put this as soft light, maybe a lower opacity, then this is what's going to be applied to the image. So let's open up a couple more textures and we'll see what we can create together. So I just love this blue texture and I love the brown one. So we're going to open those really quickly. Let that open for a sec. All right. So we're going to hit Command A, Command C to copy, Command W to close, and we're going to pop right over here and paste with Command D. Now, if you're working on a PC, it's Control instead of Command. So now we're just going to transform this with Command T. And this one I'm probably going to just freeform and make square. I just love those scratches in this one. So if you watched my other tutorial, you know that this is a baking dish. So we're going to call this baking dish, and let's use this as soft light. It's really helpful actually, and I didn't do it on this layer, to name your layer with the blending mode that you're using. So we're going to go in here and edit this and call this crackled paint soft light. And let's put this one on soft light as well. And that's really beautiful. And we're just going to bring that opacity down a little bit. And again, you're going to adjust this as you go going forward. So now we're going to just do that same thing. Command A for all, Command C to copy, Command W to close. You can do the same drag and drop thing that I did with the whole recipe, but I'm just showing you how to do this one by one. So Command V to paste, and Command T, this is a much, much bigger image, so let's just center this, and we're going to bring this size down quite a bit too. See what 50 gives us. Too small. 75, still too small. All right, we'll just make it a little bit bigger here. Still get some of that vignette rocking. Hit OK, and we're going to rename this to Bluestone. And let's try this one on multiply. So we're going to change that blending mode here to multiply, and we'll bring this way down because multiply tends to be a real punch. All right, so we've got 3 textures which may or may not work, and again, this is kind of a testing environment. But what we can now do is create a new layer, and we're going to call this cracks, because I have a cracks brush. So just say cracks brush. And we can turn these off so we can really see what we're doing. I'm going to go to my brushes up here. I'm going to reset with just hitting D. I'm going to reset my palette down here, and I'm going to choose a brush that I want to work with. And so if you've got awesome brushes or you've created awesome brushes, this is where you can really go wild with this. And we're going to just kind of play around with this a little bit, see what that does. And let's do another one with the different cracks. So let's call this like smaller cracks. And we'll go in here and let's see if we can find something like this. And we'll just, again, we're just kind of changing the orientation here so that it doesn't look like we've stamped the same thing over and over again. All right. So this is a very simple little recipe, and for ease of transfer, we are going to create a group right here, and we're going to call this Grunge group. And now what you can do is just select all those layers, move them into your Grunge group, and if you just pull this to the side right here, you can drag the entire thing by using your arrow key onto your image. And so I'm just dragging this onto my final image right here. And we're going to see what happens if this creates a nice addition or not. So now you can see this has been added to my, my image right there. And what's happened is we don't have all of our layers oriented the same. That's fine. We can just use that same trick, Control T, and we're going to expand this size, and you can move each one of these a little bit as you will. And in fact, you know what, I'm going to do this just with my texture layers, not with my brushes, because the brushes are fine and we can move those around separately. So we're transforming these 3 layers together just so that they fit the parameters of this image. I'm going to let that transform, and then we're going to move around these crackles a little bit. And because this is a lot of information, it's going to take a minute to transform. There we go. So now what we can do is we can place these cracks where we see fit. So maybe I want them to be here, and maybe I want this to be here. All right, so that is a pretty simple, easy, effective way for you to start transforming your work and giving it continuity. I'm actually going to turn these off because I don't love them. Hey, would you like to have the texture pack that you saw me working with for this tutorial? Well, jump on my newsletter. You'll get it as a free download immediately, as well as weekly tutorials, other Photoshop goodies, and just general awesome discussion about being an artist. So sign up now and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks, bye.